A beautiful sunset on Santa Cruz Island reflecting off the ocean. A Channel Island fox wanders on a mountain rock, sniffing. A young pup explores the area around the den. A Chumash elder, Julie Tumamite Stensley, wearing an acorn necklace and red and violet blouse.
My people brought the foxes over at least 8,000, if not more, years ago.
Two foxes interacting.
As long as we have been on those islands, the fox has been with us.
Majestic views of the island.
Santa Cruz is 24 miles long, 6 miles wide. But when you're on foot, it's a pretty big place to be. Some of our oldest remains that have been scientifically dated go to 14,000 years. So when we say this is our homeland, we really mean it. There's actually two creation stories, but one of them has us coming from Limuw, being brought up out of the earth there.
Limuw is the Chumash people's name for Santa Cruz Island.
That sense of knowing, being on those islands for so many of those 1,000 years, they really understood their world there, made it paradise. Our people were devastated.
Historic image of a Chumash man.
At the time of colonization, we were removed from the islands and for decades never realized our connection to them.
Dramatic fog rolls over a mountain.
Early European settlers on the island also altered the fragile ecosystem in fundamental ways.
Historic cattle and sheep farms.
By the 19th century, they had established vast sheep and cattle ranches on Santa Cruz, Santa Rosa, and San Miguel Islands.
A fox licking another.
And the unique little Channel Island fox, apex predator of the islands for thousands of years, was a casualty.
Island ecosystems are very special places. They tend to be much more fragile than mainland ecosystems.
Christina Bozer, wildlife biologist, stands in a forest.
The number of species we have in the island is much fewer than the mainland.
A Channel Island scrub jay cocks his head.
And those species have evolved differently to suit to their new environment. Little changes in island ecosystems can have big impacts.
A rare plant.
There are a number of native, rare, and endemic species on this island.
Foxes in native habitat.
One being the fox, descended from the mainland gray fox, which is about 10 to 12 pounds. When the foxes got out to this island, we think they shrunk. They went down to only 4 pounds, smaller than your average house cat by a great margin. Likely that was a combination of unique island factors. Perhaps there just wasn't the same kind of food base available to them out here, so they had to shrink their body size in order to be sustainable here on this island.
Blue Island scrub jay on twig.
Another example is the island scrub jay. It is the only insular endemic bird species in North America, and it only exists on Santa Cruz Island, and that bird species actually got bigger, and it got bluer. So it's bluer and about 30% bigger than the mainland scrub jay.
Rare Channel Island red flowers.
So islands do funny things to species, which makes them special places and makes the species on the island important to learn more about.
Two foxes grooming each other, and foxes living life in the wild on Santa Cruz Island.
Island foxes are pretty special creatures. They only exist on the California islands. They have a very unique personality because they don't spend a lot of time with people. Tend to be very curious about what we're doing, but they also have their foxy little lives that they have to get on with.
Grand Island Vista. Kat Darst woman biologist in blue U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service shirt.
The most recent data suggests that Channel Island foxes have only been on the Channel Islands for maybe the last 6,000 years. So it's likely that Native Americans took them across with them.
Christina Bozer in Forest.
We do see ritualistic burials that we have found where the Chumash obviously cared a lot about these animals.
Map showing foxes' route through the islands.
And about 3,000 years ago, transported them down to the southern islands.
Chumash elder and fox images.
The fox was treated as a relative. It was a companion. It's highly prized as a spirit animal as well. They were buried with people, with abalone shells, tube whistles. They're buried with children. They were just really honored, and they were sacred animals, and they still are today. They are clever, they're smart.
A fox trying to bite a wildlife camera.
We're warned even today, don't leave your stuff out. They know how to do stuff. They'll open the zippers, they'll steal your shoes. We're walking around, we see one sock somewhere. They like to take things.
Peaceful island landscape.
Santa Cruz Island was home to the Santa Cruz Island Company, and that was a ranching company
Images of old ranching days.
that would ranch mostly cattle, some sheep, and at some point pigs were also introduced to the island.
Wild pig running in brush.
Having them on the island wasn't sustainable. The vegetation in many places was reduced to bare earth
Island with sheep and no plants.
due to grazing by feral sheep. When the Nature Conservancy started looking into restoration on this island,
People removing sheep from the island.
one of the first things we needed to do was remove the huge threat to the island ecosystem as a whole. So we spent about 5 years in the 80s taking feral sheep off the island. And we thought things were looking up, the vegetation started coming back.
Island with plants and vegetation again.
We thought we did a great job. And then in the late 90s, we started noticing fewer and fewer foxes.
Cat Darst is back.
In 2004, the service listed 4 of the 6 subspecies of Channel Island foxes as endangered under the Endangered Species list.
Christina Bozer is back.
So where we thought previously there might have been 1,500 or 2,000 foxes on the island,
Christina cares for a fox.
we were seeing so many carcasses and really not very many foxes around during the day.
Foxes in captive pens with people caring for them.
The only way to make sure that they would survive until we could do something to remove the threat was to pull those foxes into captivity and learn how to captive breed them.
The decline in the Channel Island foxes was because of predation by golden eagles.
Golden Eagle looks over the island.
And the reason that the golden eagles were on the islands is because those niches, which normally would be filled by the native bald eagles, were empty.
DDT can. Contaminated water draining to ocean. Cat Darst is back.
The bald eagles had been poisoned by DDT, so there were no bald eagles on the island. When the bald eagles are there, they mostly eat fish and other small birds, and so they don't really eat things like foxes. Golden eagles, on the other hand, are more generalists, so they were subsidized by the feral piglets on the island.
A feral pig.
And there they were, Channel Island foxes,
A young fox family.
delicious for golden eagles. We had a problem. We had an ecosystem that was out of balance. You throw one thing off and other things get thrown off, and definitely part of that cascade effect was that we were about to lose Channel Island foxes. That really happened because of human impacts to the islands and the introduction of non-native species.
Christina Bozer is back.
Feral pigs had been introduced to the island in the 1850s and were pretty well dominating the system.
Feral pig and pig hunter with dog.
To ensure that we weren't just removing the golden eagles that had nested on the island, but we also removed the draw to the island, which is the feral pigs.
Chumash elder is back.
I started going out there in the late 80s, and I've seen the transition of, especially on Santa Cruz, of the removal of the sheep, the pigs, the golden eagles, and I've seen the resurrection of the native plants.
Channel Island plants and flowers in bloom and beautiful views of the ocean.
By removing the pigs, fox really did save our archaeological sites in that whole process.
Chumash Ancient Archaeological Site.
And that's hard to do because the entire island is full of our remnants of our lifeways out there.
Christina Bozer is back.
There's this one pair of golden eagles that was quite smart, had seen many of their compatriots trapped and pulled off the island.
Golden eagle removed from a trap.
And it took us 2 years to get them, but we finally got them. When we went into that one nest to remove the chick and fledge it out in Northern California, there were a lot of fox collars in there, a lot of radio collars, a lot of fox bones. I think we pulled out, over a dozen collars and over 2 dozen individuals.
Golden eagle chick in nest with many fox bones and collars around it.
So even just having this one pair with a chick nesting on the island was still impacting the fox population.
Kat Darst is back.
The non-native species were removed, and so once the feral pigs and the golden eagles were removed from the island, that removed the threat to island foxes.
Christina Bozer is back.
We were able to start releasing the captive individuals into the wild. And yes, fortunately, we saw a pretty quick turnaround. The foxes knew what to do when they got out into the wild.
Foxes courting and a den with cute pups cuddling. One falls asleep.
In 2006, I started working as a fox biologist on Santa Cruz Island. Figured out somewhere along college that field biology could be a career, which I never thought could be the case.
Christina removes a live fox from a trap.
People would actually pay you to tromp around in the woods and research animals. So when I started, we think that there was about 100 individuals on Santa Cruz Island.
Foxes in the wild.
And 20 of those were in captivity. I was also thrust into a role where very quickly I was the only person on the Fox Project and figured out how special these animals are. There was one individual in Laguna Canyon, the canyon where the golden eagles lived.
A dramatic canyon.
And she was a survivor. There really wasn't any other foxes in that canyon at the time.
A weak-looking fox.
We started noticing her kind of limping around and looking a little woozy. Put out a trap, captured her, and she was just covered in parasites. We think she was just very, very unhealthy.
Christina examining fox and doing a health check.
So we took her in, gave her some flea medication, kind of let her feel better, put her back out into that canyon with a collar on.
Christina letting the fox free, and it runs off. Christina is back and looks emotional.
And then I spent the next 10 years tracking her. She was our oldest fox that we ever had on collar. And she lived to be 10 years old and died peacefully under a bush. And I got to spend 10 years watching her grow up.
Fox looking and sunset on island.
Santa Cruz Island was really in a crisis mode when we started working on the island in the 80s. We uncovered challenge after challenge, but with our partners, found a way to pull off a pretty tremendous restoration effort.
Kat Darst is back.
The low of the population declines, we were looking at like 15 island foxes on a couple of the islands, and Santa Cruz, the bigger island, had around 50.
Fox caring for young pups.
This is a species on the brink of extinction. It's extraordinary that we were able to bring them back from that brink of extinction.
Chumash elder is back.
And where it went from a moonscape out there where nothing was growing. After the removal of those animals, we were seeing pine forests. Now they're taller than me. It's been over 20 years that all has happened. So we've seen this coming back.
Kat Darst is back.
The island fox is a perfect example of what can go right for an endangered species. It had all the right pieces: identifiable threat, partners that were willing to help, scientists that were engaged. Those are the pieces that you need to get something recovered and off the endangered species list.
Fox mother playing with pups. Christina Bozer is back.
When I look at this island, of course, I see the vegetation that's come back. I see the foxes that are all over the place. But I also hope that people are looking to us to understand that conservation done right will produce fantastic results for ourselves and also for future generations.
A young fox family frolics in the tall grasses. Kat Darst is back.
Knowing that the main threat to their continued existence was golden eagle predation, this gave us something to focus on. One specific thing that if we could fix that problem, then maybe we could bring the foxes back from the brink of extinction. It gets really challenging with species that have many threats, more than one threat, or if it's habitat loss where it's something that's difficult to reverse.
Foxes interacting in the wild.
So it was very fortunate in the case of island foxes, where it was something that we could work on, we could pinpoint, put a lot of energy into that one thing, and not to say it was easy. I mean, removing 5,000 feral pigs from an island off the coast of California is not easy. Bringing foxes into captivity for captive breeding is not easy, but it's something that you are pretty sure is gonna work because you know what the problem is. Island fox was the fastest recovered mammal that's ever been listed on the endangered species list. It was about a dozen years between when it was listed and when we were able to take it off the list. Human impacts are often what drives a species towards extinction, but it's human efforts that can reverse those population declines and cause a species to become recovered.
An adorable fox pup wanders and lies down sleepily.
And that's the land managers, the biologists, other scientists, and the general public. Everyone working together, working towards a common goal. That's how we're going to reverse extinction.